Okay, I think we can start now. Everybody should be here. Now, I welcome everybody to this webinar about the ABCs of graph styling for developers. My name is Benjamin Niedermann. I'm a software developer at yWorks, and I'm happy to welcome you to the 7th episode of this series about the art of graph visualization. In this series of webinars, I show you how to create not only beautiful, but also meaningful and useful graph visualizations. And with this, I mean how to create graph visualizations from which you can actually derive new information from your connected data. In the first 5 episodes, I gave a broad overview about the most important aspects that you need to take into account when creating a graph visualization. This included the problem setting itself, but also the layout, the styling, and interaction. And now in the last 3 episodes, starting with the 6th episode, I also want to show you how to create graph visualizations programmatically, also having a look at different aspects. So in the 6th episode, I showed you how to create the layout for the graph visualization. And in this episode, I show you how to define the styling of the graph visualization. If you haven't watched the episodes before, then this is no problem. You can find them on YouTube and you can watch them there. Further, all of these episodes can be understood by themselves. So also today, it's no problem if you don't know the episodes before. So in this episode, I will talk about graph styling. So the question how to define, for example, colors for the nodes, edges, and labels, but also more complex techniques like highlighting and custom shapes for the nodes. So let's start with the webinar, and I would like to use yFiles for HTML. This is one of the main products of yWorks. So yFiles is a library that you can use to create graph visualizations programmatically. So it offers you a lot of layout algorithms that you can use to create the layout of the graph visualization or the network visualization. And with layout, I mean the placement of the nodes and the routing of the edges. But it also comprises a lot of components that you can use, for example, for styling, for interaction. And in order to show you this in greater detail today, I also would like to use the playground that you can also access on our website. So I just want to show you shortly the playground so that you can understand how the webinar will work or how we will do the examples in this webinar. So let's go to the playground. So you can also follow this link. And then what you get is here this playground. And here you have already some examples. I just go to my first example or my first graph. And the idea is that this playground consists basically of 2 parts, namely on the left-hand side, the part containing the source code, here in this case, some TypeScript. And then on the right-hand side, you have the canvas where the graph visualization is actually drawn. So the idea is that here on the left-hand side, you can describe how the graph visualization should look like in a programmatic way. And basically, the idea is that you are given a graph object, just called graph. And with this, you can create, for example, a network. And then here in this case, we create a very simple network, namely a tree network, starting with a root node and then adding new nodes and also randomly some edges, gaining some tree structure. And the second object that you are given in this playground is the graph component. And this is basically a representation of the canvas and all its interactions, for example, on access point to this. And here the idea is that the graph component already knows the graph object, and we apply a layout algorithm, namely the tree layout algorithms, and then applying this on the canvas, we get here this visualization. Today, I would like to focus on the styling, so about the question how to change the color, for example, of the nodes or the edges, or doing even more complex things. So going back to the slides. As done in the previous episodes, I would like to do this using a running example, which we derived from Discogs.com. This is a Wikipedia-like database on audio recording. So this is basically maintained by thousands of users and contains millions of entries about releases and also about artists and labels. So if you go to the site, what you can do is you can explore the database basically by clicking on links and reading the entries. So, for example, here about the Beatles, but of course also about the artists, and you get a lot of information. The nice thing here is that you can also use a very simple API to derive the data. So we have extracted some of the entries in a very simple JSON format. So for example, the artists here, we extracted some ID, a name, and also the music groups the artists were member of or are member of, and then also the number of releases. On the other hand, we also extracted the music groups, so also an ID, some name, the first release and the last release, for example, but also the genres in which the music group published their recordings. So, and now it would be nice to get a visualization of this graph or of this data, basically. And in the previous episodes, I discussed which kind of visualizations you could think of. And at the end, we came up with one visualization that should convey some information about the history of the artist. So here the idea is that each artist represents a path in this graph visualization. So for example, Paul McCartney is a member of the Beatles and also of the group Linda and Paul McCartney and the Wings. And the order of these nodes on this path should also represent the temporal component, so when the first releases were of this music group. And in the episodes, I then discussed that or showed that this could be an interesting idea to automatically visualize, and the result is this visualization here. I just go to this. You can also find this visualization in the playground. To that end, you can go here to the examples, and here you find this example histories of artists, which basically loads this example here. So if I press run, the playground basically computes this layout live on your computer. And then what you can do, you can interact with this graph visualization. Here we have, for example, Paul McCartney, and the path of Paul McCartney goes through the music group, the Quarrymen, and then the Beatles, and so on. And this gives you a very nice graph visualization that gives you some information about the history of the artists, but also about their collaborations. In this episode today, I would like to focus on the styling, which basically means that I simplified the layout a little bit. So, for example, there's no time columns anymore, or no time rows anymore, but we just use a simple hierarchical layout for this. So if you would like to know more about how to create the layout, so the placement of the nodes, I recommend to have a look at the previous episode where I explained this. Today, I would like to explain how to get from this very simple visualization where you don't get any information from the visualization to this one where you basically get more information, namely where we have styled the nodes, we have added some information, we have styled the labels, but also the edges have become styled. So, and this result you can also find in the playground. To that end, you can go here on this link. And if you want to, you can already have a look at the source code here. I just press the run button, and again, you can basically interact with this graph visualization. We have here some highlighting. I will also explain how to do this, but I also will explain how to add images and also how to add formatted text to these nodes. On the left-hand side, you can find the source code. It's basically structured in different regions, and each region has some functionality. So there is some region about loading the graph, which I also explained in the previous episode. Then there's also a region about running the layout and also configuring the layout. All this is explained in the previous episode. Today, I would like to focus on these four functions, namely creating the styling for nodes, labels, and edges, and also custom node styles. And yeah, during this webinar, I will explain this in greater detail. So let's go back to the slides. So I will structure the webinar as follows. The first part will be about basics, so about, for example, node style, the label style, and also the edge style. Then the second part will be about more advanced techniques like highlighting and custom styles. And after this coding part, I will also give you an outlook on aspects that we haven't discussed here in this webinar. Besides that, I also would like to mention at this point that if you have some questions during the webinar, then please feel free to post them into the chat. My colleague Frank will collect these questions, and at the end of this webinar, there will be a Q&A session in which I will answer these questions. In case that you watch this video on YouTube after this webinar took place, you can also just leave some comment and questions in the section or comment section below the video, and we will try to answer them as soon as possible. So let's start with the coding part. And I would like to talk about the node style. So how to define the shape of the node and also the color. And this is basically rather simple. So we are given at the beginning a very simple styling where each node is just a square and is basically white. And in the first step, I would like to replace these nodes by simple images and also the group nodes, so the music group nodes, by circles. And when you have a look at yFiles for HTML and at the documentation, you will find that the basic element, namely the inode, has several properties, and one of these properties is this inode style property, which basically defines how this node is drawn. And this inode style is an interface which is implemented by many different classes, each having a bit different functionality. And today I would like to talk about the shape node style and the image node style. So let's start with the shape node style. And as I said before, I would like to change the shape of the music groups. And what I do is I just go through the nodes of the graph and I filter the nodes using a predicate. It's called isMusicGroup. It's basically a function that just decides based on some tag of the node whether this node is a music group or an artist node. And for all these nodes, I set the style of the node by creating a new node shape style, defining some properties. And here you can see already one important pattern in yFiles, namely that if you want to change something on the node, so for example, the style, but maybe also the layout of the node, then you need to take the way via the graph object. So everything that is written on the node, or most of this has some function on the graph. So we have here a graph.setStyle, and then this expects the node here. And then we get pass also some arguments how we would like to change the node. In this example, we would like to change the style of the node. And this shape node style has several different properties. So for example, the CSS class, or the shape, or also the stroke, and also a renderer, which is then basically responsible for drawing this node. So if you want to do more advanced things, you can also think about having a look at the renderer here. So in our use case, I would like to use the ellipse as a shape. So basically, as we have square nodes, we get a circle for each node. And there are many different possibilities what kind of shapes you could use for your nodes. So here we have this ellipse, but you can also use rectangles, diamonds, triangles. So there are many different predefined shapes that you can use to represent your node. The next part that I would like to mention is, or to consider, is how to set an image for a node. And here the approach is quite the same. So we go through all nodes of the graph and we just have a look at the nodes that are artist nodes. And what we do is that we load an image based on the tag of the node. So if you have a look at the entire code, which you also can find in the playground via this link here, then you can find here this load image function, which is basically a very simple lookup for some URLs containing some or pointing to some images. And this lookup is based on the names of the artists, and these names are just tagged to the nodes. And using this function here, we get the image path, and then we again set the style of the node. But instead of using the shape node style, we use the image node style. And if the artist has no defined image, then we just use a default image, which I also just have defined in the source code. So basically, this is also just a URL. As you can see here, there are also, again, different properties that you can set, but the most important one is the image property describing the source of the image. So this was already what I wanted to show you about the node style. And in this part, you should just have learned how to change the styles of graph elements in a visualization. And if you want to learn more about the node style, so for example, more advanced techniques like hitting tests or rendering performance and so on, I recommend you to just go to our demos page and have a look at the tutorials. So I just go there once. So this is the demo page, and there you can find different tutorials that you then can launch. And yeah. This should give you already some anchor where you can start working with yFiles, especially so for styling. So let's go to the next slide. Next, I would like to talk about label styles. This becomes now a bit more complex. Here, the idea is, or basically the first labels are still quite simple. Namely here, these labels. I just want to show you how to style them. And then in the second part, I also want to talk about how to create more complex labels that have some kind of text formatting using a markup language. And to that end, I would like to consider two different iLabel styles, namely the default label style and the markup label style. And as you've noticed, or maybe already, is that these are classes of iLabel style. So this is a very similar mechanism to the inode and inode label style, inode style. So if you understand how to work with node styles, then you also understand how to work with label styles. So how to apply the label styling? So what I first want to do is to just make them a bit larger and wide. And what you can do is, again, you just go through all labels, and then you can set the styles of the labels and just use the default label style. So this is basically very similar to what you have seen for the shape node styles. again, you have several properties that you can set. So for example, the font, but also the text fill. So in this case, we would like to have white color. And then also the insets. So basically how the distance between the border of the label, so described by a rectangle, and the text. Talking about the properties, the default label style has a lot of properties that you can configure. I don't want to go through them, but I just want to give you a very short overview of them. So you can decide whether this style auto flips the labels, so if you rotate the labels, but you can also define backgrounds. And again, you can use CSS classes, and but there are many different other properties as well. For example, also about the text and the arrangement of the text. So here, this gives you already a possibility to do some basic arrangement of the labels, texts. However, the problem is that if you want to do some formatting of the text, the default label style is not sufficient, but you need a more complex label style. And for this, you can use the markup label style, which allows you, for example, to make some part of the text bold, but also italic. And there are many different ways to do the formatting of the text. So how to do this? Here we have this method create markup labels, and here I actually create the labels. So in the previous example, I assumed that the labels are already given. Here we just create additional labels. So what we do is, again, we go through all nodes of the graph and filter them for the music groups. And then for each music group, I just create a label, and this add label method expects the node and then also the text of the node. And this text is basically a string that is, which is basically a complies with the markup language. So what I do here is creating this text is basically concatenating some strings. So I say, okay, the name of the artist should be underlined and should get the header 3 tag, and also the genres in which the artist has published, not the artist, the music group has published releases, should be listed line by line, and this should be italic. And you can use different kind of formatting commands. So if you apply this, for example, to the Beatles, you get basically this string. However, of course, you don't want to show this kind of string in the label. So what we need to do is to tell the graph that it should use a markup language. And for that end, you can use the markup label style. And this markup label style expects, again, some properties which are derived from the default label style, like the font, but also the alignment of the text, the maximum size, the text fill. And this is already enough to define this. So now the graph knows, okay, or the renderer knows that this label should be, or the text of the label should be interpreted as a markup. You can have a look at this in greater detail going to the playground. Again, here the part 2. And you can find this here in apply label styling. So I forgot to show this also for the node styling, but I think it's sufficient if I show you this in apply styling. And here you can find basically all the code that I've just shown you on the slides. And running this, we already get this graph visualization here, where we have these formatted labels and also the nodes that are already styled. So if you want to learn more about label styles, I again recommend you to go to the tutorials and have a look at the different topics. But you can also go into our documentation. There's the developer's guide, which also helps you and gives you a lot of articles how to use certain things. So let's talk about the edge style. And here again, I would like to have have a look at another aspect that is very important in yFiles, namely how to use, for example, CSS styling. And again, each edge has a property, it's called style, and this property is of type iStyle, edge style, and there are different implementation of this interface, and we will have a look at the polyline edge style, which is a typical edge style just to draw a polyline, so to draw a typical edge here. So here, the idea is that we would like to make the edges dashed and also change the color, and we would like to add some errors. And to that end, what we can do is we go through all edges of the graph and define the styles, or the polyline edge style for each edge. And then what we do is we define a stroke with 4 pixels, and there's also this current color here. And this current color means that we want to use the color of the CSS class that we've defined in a separate file. And this CSS class is called edge style. Just to have a look at this, the edge style or the class edge style is defined as follows. We have a color and also a stroke array, and then I also changed the opacity slightly. So you can here use different CSS properties to define your styles. And this is also possible for example, node styles and label styles, if you have maybe already noticed in the previous examples. Apart from that, we also use the target arrow. Here you could also use current color, but here I've just used just a color string for this. And then again, when we have defined the style, you add the style to the graph, telling that this edge should use the style. Maybe one word about creating these style objects. You don't need to create for each graph element a new edge or new style object, but you could reuse these style objects. This can also be helpful if you want to be sure that all of the graph elements of a certain type get the same style object, and then you can also change things on the style object, and then this is propagated to all these elements. So this is also basically a design decision that you can make at this point. Here in this case, I just decided, okay, I just create for each edge a single style object. Again, as said before, there are tutorials for edge styles, how to do this. Yeah, giving you ideas for more complex edge styles. So for example, maybe you would like to have parallel polylines, or you would like, again, to do some hitting tests. All this is explained in the tutorials. So now I would like to go from the basic topics to the more advanced topics. The first topic that I would like to discuss are highlights. Highlights gives you the possibility, so when you have a large graph visualization and you would like to highlight some elements to make sure that the viewer of the visualization actually focuses on this. So then you can highlight these elements. In our use case, for example, what you could do is that you highlight the path of Paul McCartney, and then it's easier for the user of this graph visualization to follow this path. I just go to the playground shortly before I go into the code, because what you can also do with highlighting, or just to show with the highlighting, is that of course, you can do animations. So this increases again the focus for the viewer. So now it's really clear, okay, I should focus on this path. What you also can do is you can, of course, change the highlighting so that, or the user can change the highlighting to make things more readable. Here, again, highlighting some of the paths. So now I would like to show you the main principles how to do this. So going back to the slides. So basically there's one class that you can use and to do this, and it's quite simple to use this. You can use the graph highlight indicator manager. So this is basically a manager that manages for you all these highlights that you add to your graph visualization. And it allows you to define different styles. So for example, to define an edge style, and here you can define in a very similar way as you've already done for the edges, polyline edge style, and you can define the stroke, and you can again define the current color that you would like to use, telling the manager, okay, or the renderer, okay, I should use the CSS class and the defined color in this CSS class. And this time the CSS class is called highlighted path. So just have a look at the CSS class. Basically, it's quite simple. It has a color and then some stroke dash array and stroke dash offset. And then this is also very nice with the CSS classes. They also support animations. And as we basically render the visualization using SVG, we can use these animations easily. So basically what you can do is you can define animations as this typically is done in CSS. Here I have called this animation marching ants, and basically it changes the stroke offsets within a certain period of time. And this gives you then this very nice animation. So while on the first side, it may look complicated to create such an animation, it's rather simple by just defining a corresponding CSS class and then just telling the highlight manager to use this CSS class. So the next question is, of course, what should I do with this highlight manager now? And the idea is that you attach this highlight manager to the graph component. So the graph component, again, is the anchor point that gives you access to the canvas where the graph visualization is drawn on. And this has a property, it's called highlight indicator manager, and you just assign the highlight manager to this property. And then finally, we also need to tell the highlight manager which of the edges should be highlighted. And what we do is we write a method called apply highlighting. It expects the highlight manager, the graph, and the name of the artist whose path we would like to highlight. So we go through all the edges that belong to the artist. Again, when loading the graph, we tag the edges with the name of the artist. So we filter all the edges that belong to the artist. And then the highlight manager has this method add highlight, and we just pass this edge to the add highlight. And this is all. And then when doing this, the graph component is automatically updated and you get this nice highlight. So now what you also need to do if when you, for example, introduce interactions like I've shown, where you can click on another artist, you also need to clear this highlighting. And to that end, you can just call clear highlights. And with this, you already get the result. So let's have a look at the source code, how this is done, or how this is done in the playground. Here you have this region highlight that you can just expand this region by clicking on this. And here you basically see how this is done. And then here, this is what I've shown you how to register the highlight manager. And then here you also get this function, apply highlighting, that I've shown you before. And here at this point, I say, okay, I would like to apply the highlighting on the artist Paul McCartney. And this gives you here this yellow highlighting. And as you have noticed before, probably you can also click on these artists here, and then the highlighting is changed. And this is done basically here. in this part where I actually register some item click listener on the input mode of the graph component. More about this I will discuss in the next episode, but it gives you already some idea. So basically what you can do, you can register a click listener, and when the clicked event is an artist, then I apply the highlighting on this item, so on this artist, just passing the name to the apply highlighting method. And this is all what you need to write such an highlighting that can also interactively be changed. So let's go back. This explained how to do the highlighting. And there are also demos that you can have a look at our website. So just have a look at the complex highlighter decorator. I hope that, okay, now it works. So you can find this demo also on our website. If you go to demos, and then you can, yeah, just edit or text into the edit search field complex highlight decorator. You can scroll through this, and this gives you an idea also how to do more complex highlights that basically have custom shapes, for example. So here in this case, this triangle is not highlighted with a rectangle, but also with a triangle, or here the circle is also highlighted with a circle. If you're interested in how to do this programmatically, you can also go to our GitHub, and here you can find the source code of all the demos that you can find on our page. So finally, I also would like to discuss how to define custom styles. So much more complex custom styles than what you've seen before. Here, the idea is that that you can define a style, for example, that represents an HTML element, so a div element, and then this div element is used as a visual representative for the node. So basically, what you can see here is an HTML element, and that also allows the typical interaction an HTML element allows you or provides you. So let's have a look at this. And the only thing that you need to do is you need to write your own node style. And this node style extends the node style base, which already gives you the basic functionality, and you only need to implement two functions or two methods. So as we use TypeScript, we also need to do some type definition. Namely, here we need to define the type HTML editable node style visual, which basically is an HTML div element. And now what we need to do is to implement two methods, namely create visual and update visual. Create visual is called once when the style is, or when the object is created, and then every time we need to update the visualization, update visual is called, and then you can react on some changes. So let's have a look at the first method. It's quite simple. What we do is, in a typical HTML way, we just create a div element, and then we define the content of the div element. This is just HTML code. I don't want to give all the details about this, but this is the function that I've used. So as you can see, this is basically an HTML string. You can create this in different ways, and then you just pass this to the div element. And then what you can do is you can create a visual from this div element, and then what you need to do is to tell the renderer where the div element should placed, and what we say, okay, it should get the layout of the node, of the corresponding node that we are given with this function here. So basically what we do is we place this div element at the coordinates of this node. And this is everything that we need to do, and then we return the visual. And everything about defining where the image is placed and what kind of text we would like to use and the formatting and so is not depending on yFiles, but it's just a simple HTML code defining a div element. And then we also need to define the update. And in this case, it's very simple. We just need to tell the HTML visual, so the old visual, to use again the node layout. So we again place this at the position of the node and also say, okay, it should use the rectangle of this node. And then we return this. Here at this point, you can do much more complicated things. You can then change also, for example, the HTML code to react on certain events. But this gives you already a very basic pattern how to define such custom styles. So let's have a look at this in our example. This custom node style is done here and apply custom node style. And what we do here is that we go through all artists. We filter them for the artists, the nodes, and then we have a look at the description lookup that I've created before, and I have a look whether this lookup has some description for this particular artist. And if this is the case, then I create this HTML node style that I've shown you on the slides. And then I also set the node layout before. So if I run this, as you can see in this example, I only have for 2 artists a description, and this means that only for 2 of these artists I override the image node style with the HTML node style, and then we get here these div elements. And here, for example, I can also click on this button and okay, in this presentation mode, I cannot do this, but normally you can click on this button here and then and page is opened which is forwarded to discogs.com. So this gives you an idea how to define custom styles in a very basic manner, where you can use HTML code or different ways to render this. And if you want to know more about custom styles, there are also some tutorials, but also a demo where you can have a look at. Here we have used a different way we used also custom styles to define really colorful nodes for or colorful visuals to represent the nodes. So with this, you've learned how to create custom styles in a very basic manner. In a few seconds, I will also talk about more sophisticated approaches, and this brings me already to the end of the coding part, where I actually show you a lot of yFiles HTML code. And now I would like to go to the part where I give you an outlook on aspects of styling that I haven't shown you, but which is also supported by yFiles. Again, also the outlook is only a small outlook. There's much more. If you want to learn all the details, I recommend you to have a look at our documentation or the demos. So what you also can do is you can define styles using frameworks of third parties like Angular or Vue or React, and in different kind of combinations. So you can define React component node styles. And for all this, you can also find demos how to do this. And again, on GitHub, you can also find the corresponding source code for this. One example I would like to have a more detailed look at is the React JSX component style. It basically combines React and JSX, so a JavaScript XML language. And there's also this demo. And what you can see here is that the node style is basically defined by a function. And then here by this XML like language, which basically let you focus on the image or on the styling of the node without considering all the details of yFiles, how to create this node style. So basically, you don't, in this case, you don't need to create your own node style class. And here in this example, we use SVG. So basically this XML here is a definition of an SVG, so of a vector graphic, but you can also do this for HTML. And in this demo, you can apply directly change properties here or the code and then apply the function. And then the node style will change directly to this. We can do this like on this node. And now I have changed the background of this node. So I just consider the selected node and then change the background to blue. So this gives you also the possibilities if you use, for example, React or Angular or Vue to better integrate yFiles into your application. I also haven't talked about WebGL. So typically the rendering is done in using SVG as default, but sometimes you have really large graphs and you need to have very fast or very good performance when it comes about rendering, but you still have a large graph. And for this, you can use WebGL. And just to show you the demo, you can find here a large graph, and you can smoothly zoom in and pan without any performance losses, because here you can actually use your graphic card or graphic device. And WebGL is, of course, also very nice to use for animations. This is also a very nice demo that you can use and just to play around with this. So, for example, you can hover over these nodes and you get these nice animations, but you can also do other animations, so you can play around with this. And all this is done in WebGL. Switching from WebGL to from SVG to WebGL is not very difficult. There are also some tutorials or some coding examples how to do this. Actually, you can also use both at the same time, in the sense that, for example, when zooming out, you use WebGL because you see a lot of the graph, a lot of elements, but you are not interested in the details. And then zooming into the graph and only showing few nodes, you then can switch to SVG. Showing the details in the typical high quality of SVG. And finally, I also would like to talk about the background. So far, I only talked about the graph elements themselves, but not about the background. Of course, you can also change the background of the graph visualization. And not only by placing a simple image in the background, but you can change it in the same way, basically, as you've implemented the custom styles to have some interactive background. So if I select this node, what happens is that the background changes with these interactions correspondingly. And basically what you do for this is also just adding visuals to the graph component that change over time or that just react to the interaction. And another example that I would like to show are maps. This is also a very nice example for backgrounds. Sometimes your graph has some correspondence with geolocations, like here these airports, and then the edges depict the flights routes between these airports. And then it would be, of course, nice to have some some map in the background with which you can also interact, and so by zooming in and then panning and so on. And of course, this is also supported with the yFiles, as this basically means that you blend in a background and then you just need to ensure that there's a good matching between the background and the nodes. But most of this can be done automatically. And finally, wrapping up the main part of this webinar, I would like to also mention that there will be also the 8th episode about interaction techniques, where we will talk about how to interact with the graph visualizations. So for example, how to interact with nodes, how to interact with edges and labels. And this episode will take place in June. And with this, I would like to end the main part of this webinar, and I would like to switch to the question session. So now I will have a short look at the chat and see what kind of questions have been placed there, and then I will answer them. So the first question, I just paste the question to the slides. The first question is, if we have SVG images to use in a node, do we need a URL? If so, is there caching, or is there better strategy for reusing SVG icons images for nodes? And the answer is that you can use URLs, but you don't need to. You can use also SVGs directly. And in the DOM, so basically, and then you can also use typical caching techniques, so you don't need to reload them every time. So in the webinar, I showed you one possibilities with these images using URLs, just because it was a bit easier to do this with less code. I just wanted to focus on different parts. But SVG is typically no problem, because the graph visualization is also part of the DOM when creating this. I hope this answers the question. So the question is, how would you handle a case where you wanted different alignment in a multi-line node label? Say you want the first line centered, but the later lines aligned left. Would you need to have multiple labels in the node, each with its own alignment setting? And if so, how do you make sure that they don't overlap? So this, of course, would be one possibility, that you use one or different or multiple labels, and then you align them. A different possibility is that you actually create your own label style that is responsible for drawing this text, having some information how to do this. So like a markup style, as I've shown before, you could also do this on your own, but you can also do an HTML label style. Therefore, you can also find demos on this, where you can basically define the text formatting using a div element and all the sub elements describing the formatting. Is using CSS classes the recommended approach? Is everything available via CSS available programmatically without CSS? I'm thinking it may be easier to test and manage a non-CSS implementation. So whether using CSS or not is depends also on how you would like to do this. So this is basically a layer that is on the top of yFiles. So you always can do this also programmatically. You don't need to use CSS, but sometimes it's just easier to define certain properties. And there are also some restrictions with CSS. So for example, if you change or define the label sizes using CSS, this is typically then not considered in the layout algorithms, but there you need to take care about this. So it's basically a convenience layer for you, but you can always do this using the standard classes of yFiles, this styling. When applying the custom node HTML style in the example, how did you know to set the graph set node layout to the to this particular angle here. Do you need to know in advance what dimension of the HTML visual are, and also set that on the node layout? So this was just for simplicity in this example. I just defined this because I didn't want to insert too much logic about resizing the nodes, and also yeah, acquiring the sizes of the div elements. But I just get here some answer of a colleague of mine. Yeah, so a colleague of mine just wrote in the chat that there are different techniques. So what you need to do is to measure the visualization. Basically that you would visualize, and then you need to, of course, somehow sync this with a node layout. And there are different techniques how to do this. So for example, you could use a hidden measure container where you can something like get bounding client interact, where you can use get bounding client rectangle to obtain this information that you then can put on the node layout. But basically, yes, there are ways how to do this automatically, so you don't need to know this in advance. I think, I hope that I haven't overseen any questions, but seems that all questions are answered. Yeah, and with this, I would like to finish this webinar. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you happy diagramming.